Good day and welcome to the Robust Ramblings podcast. With me today, I have again Rudolph, Kriek, good friend of mine, expert in the property industry. He's a property investor himself and is the co-owner of the property sales component of actionable, which is a property company in Potchefstroom. Just sharing a bit on what investment looks like in the area of property, both residential and minorly touching also on commercial. Please listen in and let me know what you think about it. It's an awesome conversation and I know I learned a lot from this. Hope you enjoy it. Rudolph, welcome. Nice to have you here again.
What a blessing to be here and to have a chat.
Yeah, I'm excited because last time we planned to have a chat on property, but we had such a great conversation, we ran out of time. So I'm thankful that you had enough time to put out again today. So we can continue the conversation and delve a bit into property, investments, your own first house purchase that you want to make, all those questions that a lot of people in our age group have, but they don't know where to start or where to find those answers. So hopefully today we can answer some of those answers or questions.
That's good, Gideon. I'm very passionate about real estate. I've been involved in the real estate business. This is my fourth year being an agent and a few years of being an owner in the agency realm. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, seeing people coming to terms with their first investments, first homes that they buy and moving in. And even in Potchefstroom specifically, there are a lot of houses that has the flat lid ability and all the cool conversation that comes from that. And especially when young people understand that there's a certain economic value to, let's say, a flat lid on the property, that might put you in a position where you can buy a property that might be a little bit more expensive, but in the end, you're still financially in the same position. So this is a very passionate area, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so just maybe for those listening to get some form of credibility on you, would you mind sharing like how many properties your agency has sold in the last 2 to 3 years?
So I started. Let's start with timeline. I came into actionable June 2021. At that stage, the sales department was running, but there was a long time where it was dormant due to the two previous agents that had to carry on with some other responsibilities and moving out of Potchefstroom. And so since 2021, we've sold 207 properties in Potch. And I've been an agent myself since June 2021, and also just a short few months prior to that, had the privilege of buying my first student home and did that with some investors and some cool opportunities that I had the privilege of being a part of. And since then, continued on my own journey of property investment. Which is always something that it takes a while to build a good base, and then from there sometimes it really brings forth momentum. And so it's like I said, out of 207 properties, you get to understand the value it brings to really go and seek that house that you really want to live in for the next maybe 10 or 2 years, or really seek out that investment, whether it be the first or the 10th. That really makes sense, and it really kind of establishes your portfolio and even maybe bring a new momentum, maybe going into a new market. Short-term rentals is a market that I've been kind of a part of lately, and something that I just see an enormous value in, and just understanding that there are different spheres of investments inside the portfolio of property. I think as an outsider, sometimes we think of property in very closed thought ways. Property is something that you live in, or property is an investment. But then when it comes to property as an investment, there's a few different type of investment. There's a seeking capital growth as an investment, seeking return on investment through rental, seeking good rental escalations, and so forth and so forth. And being in this industry, and we kind of talk a bit on developments as well, just seeing the enormous ability and the way people function within it, I really see that there are people that just position themselves within this industry, and year on year, fast forward 10 years later, they just in a whole nother level or whole nother space due to them really pushing into this real estate industry that for a lot of us, it is very intimidating. And I think due to the fact that there's not enough answers for all the questions, you kind of just year on year goes by, and fast forward 5 or 10 years later, you still didn't buy the first investor. You're still renting because you're not sure if the market is going to be stable enough. But in that 10 years, people literally started a portfolio and maybe build it up from 300 or 400,000 to 4 million in the same 10 years. So what are the things that they know or came to realize that others might not have come to realize, that puts them in that momentum and puts them in that commitment?
Yeah, so this is good. So just a small disclaimer: what Rudolph and I are speaking about is not financial advice. We're just going to share some thoughts on things that we've seen in our own lives. So Rudolph has taken me through the process of purchasing our first home. It's the one that we actually live in. So I come at it from a bit of a different angle. We're going to touch on some of the challenges that we faced in that process of making the decision. I think it would be great, Rudolph, to maybe just touch on the process of purchasing a property, what that looks like, because that still to me is confusing. I think a lot of unknowns that people don't know of or are aware of. But maybe we can start with just like if you would want to purchase a property for yourself to live in, so residential property, whether it's a flatlet, not a flatlet, how do you think about that versus renting? Because that was my first question. Is I feel like I'm paying so much money for someone else's property. I'm paying their place off. It's costing me a monthly amount. There's some things I didn't necessarily think of, the maintenance, of having your own property, the mind space that comes with it. So there's a trade-off in that. But how would you typically help someone through those questions? Firstly, renting versus buying.
So I do believe that buying property in the right season of your life really puts you in a positive position above renting, due to the fact that rent is an expense that will never go away in your life if you don't own property later on. So whereby buying property, yes, it might be expensive if you take on a full loan, whatever the case may be, but if you buy in your economical value, there will come a time when your bond might be paid off. And I see it especially with people 50, 55, 60 years old. All of a sudden, their bond gets paid off. And now all of a sudden, let's say you're staying in a suburb where a normal 4-bedroom house rents at around 20,000 Rand a month. All of a sudden, the bond gets paid off. And literally within a day, you go from, you would have paid 20,000 Rand this month, to your house only costs whatever your electricity bill and municipal bills are. And I think so property out of staying in a home, it's definitely a long term, and there's definitely two thoughts to this. There are people that they don't believe in buying a home and staying in it. They don't believe it's an investment. They believe it's something that only costs you money, and so they rent. But usually those people are heavily involved in some other sphere of the property industry where they make so much of a greater gain that in comparison to their own house that they would have bought, the other investments make so much sense that they would rather push more energy in that and rent a house. So, but that sphere or thought then usually resonates with some people, and then, well, they said it's not wise to buy your own home, and so I'll rather rent. But the difference is the guy that kind of lives by the thought, eventually in 20 years with developments or buying maybe investment property, he built up a property portfolio of 10 or 20 million Rand or even 100 million Rand. And if you take on that thought pattern of my own home is not an investment, but you're not necessarily pushing into other markets in the property industry, in 20 years' time, you don't have any investments, you don't own any property, and the 20,000, 22,000 Rand a month is just never going to go away. Even if you go on pension, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
You know? So that's maybe just a thought, and then there's obviously other people that believe so much in buying your own home that they get stuck in that. They go buy the best possible home that they can afford at that stage, or maybe can't afford, but the banks are willing to lend you the money. Mm. And then fast forward 20 years later, you're still struggling to pay off the house, and there were never enough space or money to kind of do investments. And so maybe you come to 50 or 60, and you're just struggling for that last 3 years to get your house paid off, and then you've got this one paid off house. And lately, there's actually been a few older people that had to take on some finances through their house to get cash flowing again. So cash flow is also a very big reality. So I know this kind of feels to me that, like now I'm talking this side, now I'm talking that side, but that's how the property game is kind of compiled. It's compiled with voices that really says, no, but this is the way, this is the right way. And other voices that says that the right way is the wrong way, this is the right way. And so it's important for me when it comes to these discussions, and I think even your story, Gideon, is we had a lot of coffee conversations about this. And the question was, is it better to rent or better to buy? That question alone, unfortunately, doesn't bring enough perspective. It's better to buy, but that buying has got terms and conditions. It's better to rent, but the rent has terms and conditions. For a guy that maybe sees a 20% return on investment, and he can use maybe the finances from the bank to finance his developments, maybe it's better for him to rent his house, because then he can use all the money possible to do the investment and developments that brings a 20-25% return on investment. Well, that guy might be better to rent. But you can't just duplicate that into maybe someone else that has no involvement in developments, and in the end he just rents because somebody said it's better to rent.
Yeah, I think that's good. So touching on the fact that you've got multiple opinions in your life and thinking about who to listen to, I love how Dave Ramsey, someone that I listen to the financial perspective of frequently, says don't listen to your poor uncle at the braai, on financial advice. So don't take financial advice from people who you can't see the fruit of in their life. And I think the concept of diversification is key, because that's a biblical principle. Invest in 6, no 7 ventures, because you don't know what might happen. And I like to view property as one of those buckets in which you can invest. Now, thinking of property, one thing you mentioned now was the fact that eventually your bond can be paid off. Now, there's a lot of ifs behind that. Did you manage your finances well? Did you buy within your actual budget? And I think there's the basic caveats there. So if those things were in place and your bond is paid off, and I love the comment that you made here, there's going to come a day where you're going to have cash flow to the worth of your bond payment that you can use to invest. And I think the challenge that I've seen with many guys making the return on investment calculation, or the ROI calculation, is they do it over 3 or 5 years. So over 3 or 5 years, it makes more sense for me to take this money and put it in shares or a business or whatever. But they only do the calc up to the 3 or 5 years. If you can pay off the property in 10 years or 15 or 20 years, and immediately you have another 20, in your example, 20,000 Rand injected into your ROI calculation, you're going to get, depending on what your horizon is, you're gonna find the break-even point really quickly. So for me, it's having this multi-generational hat on and saying, how can I set up my children's children? And one of those ways for me is clear to have some form of property. Now, there's obviously risks involved to purchasing property, especially if you think of your own home. Just recently, the house around the corner from us burned down. Those type of risks are there. That's why you've got insurance, and you can manage some of those risks. So some of those risks, maybe you can share some of it, but like area that you purchase a house in, there's a risk of your salary. Do you actually have a consistent salary coming in? Interest rates. What other type of risks should people think about? Because these things are trade-offs, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've mentioned a house. I think the biggest risk in the beginning is definitely the area. If you buy a property, whether it be an investment or a home in the wrong area, you might have challenges. So there are areas in and around Potch that I would not necessarily prefer to invest my own money in. That is a challenge. I need to pay with like going or like. So let's say when it comes to your own home and investment, it does differ to me personally, because there might be properties where I would not necessarily live there myself, but out of an investment point of view, it is a good investment due to the fact that it's maybe got very stable income in terms of its rent. It's got good escalation. the people staying there might have good and stable salaries, maybe like CBD area where they might work for government, and they really do get a good salary, and there's very good job security for them. But myself, with my family, I would not necessarily go and live in that same area, but I would buy an investment in that area, whether it be maybe a communal home or apartment. So that's one thing there. And when it comes to investment, the risks, in my opinion, are definitely more revolved around the type of occupants that might reside in that area. And usually what I tell people also when it comes to property investment, if you go out to that area, have a look at other things as well. As you drive to that area, what does the communal spaces look like in that area? Is it very filthy, overgrown with weeds? Because that tells you about who are the people residing in this area. What cars are driven there? What businesses are there? And because just for instance, if you drive by 7 bottle stores in a row, going to the corner apartment where the agent says, no, this is one of the best return on investments, just from my point of view, I would say yes, maybe, but what does 7 bottle stores on one street do to a society or a closed group community? It will probably have a negative impact in the next 5 or 10 years.
I mean, he was eating people doing.
Exactly, and just with a type of occupant that might be prone to drunkenness, might be prone to breaking, or might be prone to vandalism, or might be prone to not paying. So those are the things in investment point of view that I do believe is something to look at. But from let's say from buying your own home's point of view, it might be in terms of the area safety. Definitely, do you feel safe when you're coming to your own driveway, or do you feel unsafe? What does the houses in the area look like? Something that happens often as well is you may be buying to an area where the houses might be a little older, and so necessary maintenance come up. But if the neighbors in the area doesn't necessarily have the capital or the cash flow to look at their houses, it doesn't make sense for you to now have the shiniest house in the street, because chances are you're not going to get that back, or will maybe sell it on.
Yeah, because the houses around you help determine the value or the perceived value of your house. And at the end of the day, you're going to sell your house for the perceived value, not the actual value. So it's what someone's willing to pay for it. That's what it's worth.
100%. So a lot of what the property rises and falls on is a lot what keeps the JSE running. It's demand and supply. Maybe sometimes even fear and greed. Maybe sometimes, well, everyone is doing it, kind of keeping up with the Joneses. So everyone is moving to this side of town, so I'm going to move to this side of town. And I just had a conversation with a lady that might be looking at selling a house in one suburb and maybe moving to another, which there's no problem with that. There's very, very reasonable time to do that. Whether it be you maybe older, or you see a capital worth that may be growing at another space, but you can still buy a house in the best possible suburb for the wrong price, and then it's still not a good investment, whether you're going to stay there yourself or not. So a guy that has become very known for property advice, and someone that you can maybe listen to, but obviously listen to the good stuff and leave the bad stuff, because usually when it comes to people giving advice, there are some good stuff and there are some bad stuff. So whenever I say this, don't just say, oh, so Rudolph said everything this guy says is just go for it. He's a guy, Robert Kiyosaki, and he obviously made his riches through property, but it was in America. They work very different to South Africa. So everything he says that isn't necessarily applicable to our law in property and the way we do things. But one kind of terminology you always said is the profit is made in the buying, not the selling. So what happens sometimes is you buy a house for $1 million, hoping to sell it for 1.5 million. But then the day comes where it doesn't get sold for 1.5 million. Why? because the $1 million you're paying should have been 700,000 to have a good investment. And so you didn't make the profit in the buying. You hope, or you had this hope that the profit would come from the selling.
So you actually paid too much up front, which reduced your margin at the end of the day, because what someone was willing to pay, whether it be in the area or for the size of property or whatever, would be less.
100%. So when it comes to property, And Kieran and I, one of my colleagues here, actually had a laugh because he kind of made a funny video where he said, "Can I give you 3 tips for selling a house in a quite a good time frame? First, price it right. Second, price it right. Third, price it right."
Yeah.
And kind of that's like a little laugh, but it's true. There's a reason why properties that are priced at the right stage in a suburb or in a time frame of economy get sold in my others may be in the market for quite a long time. So obviously we've touched on 2 major things, and I think maybe we can dive a bit into each because there's reasons for buying your own home where you're going to stay with your family, and there's very good reasons for buying investments, and what does it look like? Because usually, and you used the word trade-off, usually there's a trade-off. And maybe I can share some of my own story in this. So I was renting a house, and we were staying. I had a lovely stay there. It was a big yard at that stage. I had small kids, and we had a direct lease agreement with the owners. And so the owners came to us and say, "Listen, we're going to put this property in the market, but do you want to maybe buy it directly from us?" So here we were an opportunity to buy a property directly from them, no agent's commission involved. So obviously we had the privilege of maybe coming to the table with a little lower in terms of what we would have offered. And we had very good relationship with the owners, so they were probably willing to give it to us for a better price. But I wasn't 100% sure of the area and how long I would want to stay in the area. At that stage of my life, I just kind of, if I envision myself in 3 or 5 years, I would probably envision myself in a different area, whether it be in Potch or maybe in South Africa. So I kind of had my, I'm not sure. And so my wife and I, together with some people, prayed a lot about it, really diving into some facts and some figures about the area. And at that stage, I wasn't in the agency. I was still in full-time ministry. So I didn't necessarily have all the information that I maybe do have now. But in the end, we decided not to. And in that last month where we had to push all our energy into moving out of this lovely house that you kind of just realize, okay, but there's 4 bedrooms, that means furniture, that means beds, that means traveling a lot to get everything out of there. And we came across an investment property that it was one of those moments where I call up my dad and I just say, "Am I seeing this right? Because if I am, this might be one of those very good opportunities that doesn't really come by that often." And so we really crunched the numbers. We didn't have a lot of time. What actually happened is I saw the property and then it was out of the market, and then I phoned a lot of agents in town, and then everyone just know it got sold. But then it was actually introduced back into the market by the guy who just recently purchased it, but no one really knew about it. And so it was this kind of, no one really knew about it. And then one agent found out, but through this agent, you can come and have a look. And so we organized and I said, okay, let's just go about it. And it was a very difficult season. You know, I could, for many reasons, I could have just said no. You know, I'm moving now. It's just, you know, I'm not sure about this. But the reason, I believe, most of all, the reason that pushed me toward that was decisions my wife and I made quite a while prior to the opportunity. And the biggest decision we made is that we want to set our foot in the industry of real estate out of an investment point of view first, and then from there, out of a personal point of view. And in Potchefstroom specifically, that meant either buying a straight-up investment property that you're going to rent out, or buy a house that has got a flat lid on that you can rent out, because that's something that's really normal in Potchefstroom specifically. In other areas in and around South Africa, it might not be that normal, but for us in Potchefstroom, that was very normal. And so because we made that decision, it made all the more difficult decisions to really going about and sign an OTP and going through the process. Because the first time I went through the process not being an agent, and came in the industry after that. And so we went through with it and bought the property. It's a communal home, and this 2 apartments at the back. And I mean, you know, fast forward, I think it's 3.5 years now. We've had some different seasons. Eventually we rode up with misfires, and even this year, the house is full of nests for students, but the 2 apartments at the back is kind of rented out on a short-term, long-term rental, way. So it became this platform of experiencing and also experimenting with different forms of what an investment house can look like. And so pivoting into investment property first, it came with a very big trade-off. And I think that's something that people don't really speak into. I mean, at that stage, I had 2 kids, and we stayed in an 80-square apartment. One of my kids literally slept in the braai room of the apartment. I'm not a big braaier anyway. I braai a little bit more now because the braai is outside.
I mean, you had a bed. You didn't sleep in the bride cell.
No, not in the bride cell. It was a very nice room. I'll show you photos of it. You won't even say it's a bride room. But the point I'm just trying to make is we had trade-offs. Yes, we had this investment property. Yes, we were thrilled to have it, and we learned a lot. And even my wife and I started talking a lot into renovations, and we just it stirred up so many energy in our hearts. We came, due to that investment, we came to realize how much we love property, and not just the investment side of it. I like to make space for people to live well. I find myself spending more money than I should on my investment house maintenance because I care about the people there. So they would say, listen, I don't think this thing is as it should be. And I would just go about and really make obviously wise decisions, not be foolish with the finances. But I would maybe push myself into creating a better space for them living there than many other people that's in the same industry that I'm in terms of the investment house and students and stuff. Where they just says, no, it's just, I'm not going to pay my money to paint his room. I'll rather paint my own. Where I'm like, I would like to paint his room as well. And just, push myself into the position where maybe in a year's time I can do it again or whatever that may be. So we came to realize a lot about ourselves and the way we function because we invested in real estate and specifically made a financial investment first, not necessarily trying to secure a place for us as a family. And there were a lot of reasons, books that I read, and knowing that if I spend my credibility with the banks to get a place for us as a family first, then that might postpone investment in property with quite some years.
Yeah, and that would make sense. So the bank, when they look at you, they look at your credit scores and all of those things, but also your portfolio cash flow availability, that type of thing. And I think if you have something that generates income, especially if it generates more income than the expenses, then obviously, I mean, that's a no-brainer. It adds to your legitimacy and credibility with the bank, making it easier to buy your own property when you eventually get there. So just sticking to the topic of your investment property for a moment, what are the type of things you look at for making an investment? So you've mentioned return on investment, the type of tenants, the area, etc. What other things should people take into consideration when wanting to buy a place like that?
So I would say the first question you've got to ask yourself is what is your risk appetite and what return on investment are you looking at? In Potchefstroom, again, specifically our context, you've got 2 types of property that you can, even with 100% loan, actually get what they call cash flow positive. And that's guest house or short-term rentals, Airbnb, guest house industry, or then student house, or maybe even a communal house in some other areas where there might be more than one tenant on the property.
But that's unique to our city. I mean, given all the schools, university, etc., etc.
100%. So maybe in your own city there might be some on those opportunities as well. But I would say I would really go and try and seek the opportunity to try and understand what type of properties do my city give me in terms that can maybe be a cash flow positive project. Yeah. Because what that means is your tenants pay off not just your bond, even some expenses on your property. And then secondly to that, should you ever go to the banks again, they would see that there might be some debt responsibilities on your profile, meaning you have to pay off this house, but you submit all the signed contracts or the signed tenant agreements on that property. And so they take an X percentage amount of what the income on that property is, and then all of a sudden you can still be able to maybe get a loan from the bank should you then want to maybe buy yourself a 2-bedroom nice townhouse or whatever that may be. So that's firstly. And then secondly, I try to aim for properties that gets as close to the break-even point as possible. So that's what's called a shortfall property. So you would probably have a 500 rand or 1,000 rand shortfall on the property, which means that you pay that 500 or 1,000 rand every month into the bond, and then eventually, due to other rental escalation, it reduces to the break-even point, or even over a certain amount of years. If you maybe try and pay off the bond in 7 or 8 or 10 years or 15 years, you must try and make that sum. How many 1,000 rands worth of shortfall that you pay over 10 years? What was that amount? Let's say it was 300,000. But if that paid off a 800,000 rand worth property, that was a good investment.
Just to clarify this point, so if you say the shortfall, you're referring to all of your revenue minus your expenses. If that's negative, it should be as close as possible to zero, but obviously it should be as high a number as possible if it's positive. So that's the shortfall that you're referring to, just to clarify.
100%. And I think that the thing that people don't understand with South Africa specifically, in terms of the interest rate that's so high, the banks, as soon as you lend money from the banks, as soon as you borrow money from the banks, you pay them 11% or 11.75% or maybe 11.75 plus 0.5, whatever that interest rate is. That is the return they make on you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So just bear with me for a moment. Many people wouldn't think twice to invest their money if they could make 12% return. They would like, yes, there's 100,000 rand invested, okay? Now you're buying a property where the banks are making that return on your money and your shortfall is still only about 500 rand or whatever. What does that mean? That means as soon as that property gets paid off, that's most probably the return that you are looking at, because that is what the banks made from you for the last 8 or whatever years, because the interest rates are so high. So I think many people fall kind of falls into a little bit of a demotivated place, because now they look at this: what is the bond cost? What are the levies? What are the municipal accounts? Or the rates and taxes and all that stuff. And my shortfall is a little bit higher. I'm not gonna push into this. But your shortfall usually might be a little high because the banks are making 12% off of you. Mm. And so as soon as that maybe drops, like in COVID, we saw it dropped to 7. I mean, even 7% is still double what America pays.
Yeah.
That's why people are making really good money in America when it comes to property, because they're not paying 12% or 11% or 10%. So as soon as that dropped to 7, not only will your cash maybe in some other pockets not necessarily get the same investments, because I mean, if the bank make 12 out of real estate, they can really pay well for your 500,000 rand that you pay to them. Why? Because they can use that 500,000 rand and maybe give it to someone again on a bond and make 12% on them again. So the banks are really making very good money in the real estate industry. And so usually when that happens, they can really give good investment options for you if you give your money to them. I'm not saying you shouldn't. We spoke about maybe doing 6 or 7 investment pockets. But I'm just trying to say that sometimes the real estate industry might seem, if you look at it maybe in a year's close time, just look at it out of a segment, this doesn't really make sense. But listen, invest in a property 3, 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 15 years. And that's the question we ask. And so you said, don't take advice from your poor uncle. I usually tell young people when they come to me asking about maybe real estate or even pension, don't ask the 28-year-old whether pension is a good idea. No. Ask the 58-year-old who's 2 years away from actually getting the pension, and ask him, if you would go back to being 28, would you have paid the pension that you may now get in 2 years' time or not? And if he says, yes, I would still pay it, then maybe consider doing so and get your own financial advice surrounding that. And if he says, no, still, even if I get, my 10 million rand in 2 years, which is not just paid out from the bank account, it's work ways that pension works in a certain manner. If he says, no, I would maybe have invested my money elsewhere, do some research in it. But usually, because you have conversation with your peers, I mean, here we are more or less in the same season of our lives, building maybe families and industry and business and real estate, the portfolios. Usually we have the conversations, which is good, but we should also have conversation with those people that is a week away from paying off their bond. I know even my dad, I called him up, and he mentioned, we speak a lot in real estate. This was quite a few years back. But anyway, he said, yeah, but my bond on my house is closing. And I thought to myself, from my perspective, that's so, that day where your bond is done, it's so far in the future, it feels like it's never going to happen. And here I'm calling my dad, and for him, it was a week. It was he could have made a reminder on his Google Calendar, says, my bond on my house is now closing. Where for us as youngsters, we feel like I've got a 20-year or 30-year loan, so it's never going to end, because it kind of feels that way. And for him, that day came where the bond was paid off and it closed. It was a closed deal. And I think something that I just want to add in that as well is maybe go and ask your parents or some of your friends' parents how much other good opportunities they had the privilege of maybe participating in because they had the collateral reality of the house. So usually you pay off your house, but because there's a collateral value, your house might still be 2 million rand worth. The actual asset value, the banks look at, not necessarily the value that you pay insurance on, because that's just the value it will cost to rebuild the house. But now the banks look at your house, says it's 2 million rand worth. But now maybe you've paid it off and maybe you only owe the banks 1.5 million. And then maybe you want to buy a car, or you want to send your kids to university, or whatever that may be. A lot of our parents lean on the bond or the collateral value of their homes to try and build through these larger expense realities in their lives. I'm not saying you should do it. Remember, now if you take 500,000 rand to buy a car, you're still paying the banks back and you're still paying interest on it. So there is a really good cash reality, and I think even David Ramsey speaks a lot on it. That I have listened to some of his stuff and read through, and the book on Total Money Makeover, and there are really some great perspectives that he brings to the table, some good nuggets, just physical, practical comments on that. But the point I'm just trying to make is that houses and real estate specifically, it's an industry that pivots to a lot of other things as well, because it really touches every part of your life. And so I think if we don't remind ourselves that people will always stay in houses. Maybe the house will be open plan, and maybe the house will, I don't know, have a helipad on the roof, or whatever the future may hold. The reality is people are going to stay in houses. And as long as people stay in houses, houses will have an economical value. And as long as houses have an economical value, there will be a way of making a good investment in it, whether it be your own home or an investment by itself. And that's something that we should remind ourselves in.
Friends, this is the end of the first section of this podcast. Please join us next week again for the second half, where we share some more valuable insights in the property game. Have a good one.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening. And I just want to encourage everyone just to subscribe, go to our social media pages, Instagram, LinkedIn. And if you guys are keen on booking a call with us, to do a session with us and just have good chats, book a call on our Linktree link, and see you guys in the next one. Thanks.